Well, welcome back to Weekly Devotionals with Paul. This week we're going to take a break from my just about everyday Bible reading plan and jump to something slightly different. It was something that I was contemplating while outside for most of yesterday morning, but there's more on that in just a second. So this video is really for those of us who, if we've followed Jesus long enough, we've walked through dry spiritual seasons. Those days when God feels distant, when life with Him feels stale, it feels quiet, it feels dry. Those moments when the Bible reading feels rote, mundane, boring, when listening to sermons or teaching feels repetitive and not relevant, when worship lyrics feel romanticized and not realistic. Those dry seasons that we all find ourselves in if we follow Jesus long enough. And typically, those we tend to view those days, those seasons, those moments as either wasted or the times in our spiritual journeys to be avoided and to not get ourselves into or to find ourselves out of as soon as we get into them. But today I want to propose something slightly different, and I want to propose a possible reason why dry seasons in our spiritual journey may be something for us to welcome when God brings it our way. That's where my mind was thinking about that while I was on my front lawn most of yesterday morning. The Bible's full of illustrations, pictures, imagery using nature and using agriculture. And by no means am I a legit farmer, but Nicole and I are trying to grow grass on our front lawn, so there's that. And that's what I was doing outside on my front lawn, was spreading spring grass food fertilizer onto our lawn. And that fertilizer came with instructions on the back. And the instructions suggested that the fertilizer, the food, be applied in early spring after the winter when the grass and the lawn were dry as could be, as possible in our springs. And that just jumped out to me. It stood out to me because at first it didn't make a ton of sense. I associate seeding, I associate fertilizing, I associate that type of gardening and agriculture with water. You seed and water, you fertilize and water. And so finding the dry days to apply the grass food just stood out to me. Why? Why was the suggestion to apply that grass food when the lawn was dry? Here's why. Because they're little tiny pellets of food. And if you apply those pellets of food when the grass is wet, it'll stick to the leaves of the grass, and the fertilizer, the food, will never get down underneath the grass onto the dirt and into the soil where the nutrients, the fertilizer, needs to get. But when the grass is dry, it can tumble down through the grass, get on top of the soil, get all the way down into that dirt, and ultimately feed the roots of the grass. So while outside on our front lawn turning the little handle on our grass lawn spreader, a different perspective came into view about spiritual dry seasons for me. Those spiritually arid days and times when we can so easily get discouraged, we can get angry, we can get envious of other people and their journey with God. We can even get to the point where we just give up and walk away from God as well. But this new perspective, is it possible? Is it possible that God cultivates for us dry seasons intentionally in our spiritual journey because He needs to prep us? He needs to dry us out, if you would. So spiritual food, fertilizer, can fall deeper down into our souls and not remain on the surface level of our journey with God? Is that possible? Is that another angle of looking at these things? That there is a deeper truth that God wants us to journey towards, but before he can give that to us, and before we can get there, we need to be spiritually dry, more receptive to receive it, maybe even more longing and desiring of it. The Bible, I think, speaks of several places where dry seasons precede the Lord's moving in our lives. Passages like Hosea 10:12, and here's Hosea 10:12, and it calls us to break up fallow ground, dry, hard ground, fallow ground, for it's time to seek the Lord, that he may come and rain righteousness upon you. Fallow ground preceded the raining of righteousness from the Lord. Or Isaiah 58:11, the Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, dry, hard ground. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and he will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. So before the Lord moved, fallow ground, scorched ground. And the bones that God breathes new life into that we see in Ezekiel 37 were dry bones. We were told they're very dry bones. So here's my thought for us for today, especially if you find yourself in a dry season. And I hope this is an encouragement. Perhaps the different perspective on this is God has not left you. God has not given up on you. Perhaps he's cultivating you and bringing you to a place he needs to get you to so that you can receive the spiritual food that he has coming for you. And I want you to cling to that hope. And why do I want you to cling to that hope? Is that just positive mumbo jumbo trying to put a spin on this to make you feel better? I don't think so. But we'll return to that next week, because in my mostly everyday Bible reading plan, I think we get an answer to why we can cling to hope in Romans 15. But we'll jump back to there next Wednesday. So in the meantime, be healthy, be safe, remain connected. If there's any way that I can pray for you or our church family can help you, email me please, paul@terranovachurch.org. Have a great day.